I'd only been overseas on business for 2 weeks. When I got back, someone was in my home, painted to look like a cat, and my family couldn't tell the difference. "Hey, get the fuck off my son," I barked, storming towards our couch, suitcase falling from my grasp somewhere along the way. Julie planted a firm hand on my chest as I tried to pass her, asking what my problem was. She insisted that I must be exhausted from the flight, that I wasn't thinking straight, but I could feel the subtext. The insinuation was as plain as day. She thought I was ass over tits drunk or worse, right in front of our son, something I'd promised never to be guilty of again. Heat gathered under my shirt collar. A flush crept up my face. I was sober. Cold, stone, sober, dry as a goddamn ditch. I mean, she was the one who'd allowed that freak into our home. She was the one who was letting them lounge on our kid's lap like nothing was wrong. How did I know she was in on something? Wordlessly, I ripped Julie's hand away and rushed past her. "Dad? Dad, what's the matter? It's just Raja, Dad." Tears began flooding. It hurt to make Ike upset, yes, but that hurt was nothing compared to the fear I felt. The raw, blistering confusion of it all. It was the gentle sparks of a firecracker versus the roiling fireball of a ballistic missile. No contest. I loomed over the brown leather sectional. Ike slid out from under them and scampered over the top of the couch, sprinting into his mother's trembling arms as soon as his feet hit the ground. The person dressed to look like a house cat didn't even react. Knees to their chest, curled and comfortable, they placed a painted, 5-fingered hand up to their mouth and rubbed their palm against their mask. I suppose they were simulating self-cleaning, but the mask didn't have a hole for our tongue to come out, so their skin just squeaked against the material. My eyelids twitched. Icy sweat drenched my back. I looked to my wife for answers, but she just seemed terrified. Terrified of me. What is this?" I whispered, knuckles collapsing into a fist. Ike whimpered. My wife raked his bleach blonde hair, silent, wide-eyed. "Who is this, Julie?" The dry, crackling scream sent her dashing to the kitchen table, where her phone was resting. Ike transitioned into full-on hysteria. And, very much like a cat, the intruder appeared perfectly indifferent to our mounting distress. They stopped licking their palm and stretched wide, shifting their stomach towards me, unafraid, unbothered, unprotected. I stared at them, disbelief running dizzy laps around the base of my skull. They were around 5 feet tall, mask included, which was circular, stout, flattened at the top, triple the size of a human skull, and circumferentially smooth. The shape reminded me of a box I used to store my extra drum cymbals. Akavika's likeness had been meticulously painted across the mask, her emerald green eyes, the black splotch surrounding her light pink nose, the ragged edges of her left ear. It was all there and accounted for. To fit the mask's bizarre dimensions, however, those familiar features needed to be distorted. Everything was a little too wide and a little too big. It was the same with their gaunt, emaciated body. They'd faithfully translated the markings of her fur onto their skin, sketching the patterns all over to fit their ghoulish proportions. A patch of white over their sunken, craterous abdomen, speckles of soft orange along their forearms, extremities which had cords of tendon revoltingly visible because of the way their thin skin wrapped tightly around their fatless frame. Worst of all, they were naked. No genitals, though. The crease was slick and seamless like a Ken doll. My rage boiled over. I descended, ready to cave their chest in with my bare hands. "Marvin! Jesus Christ, it's just a cat! Get a hold of yourself!" Julie blared. My fist holded inches from their breastbone. They didn't flinch. I creeped upright so I could see my wife's eyes. You think they're a cat? You think this is Raja?" Ike was beyond hysterics at that point, shrieking, inconsolable, face pressed hard into her pant leg. Julie didn't answer. She pulled Ike away into another room, urgently muttering to the 911 dispatcher. "Yes, he's on something, or drunk, or sick, I don't know. Just get someone over here." My mouth felt dry. I ran a quivering hand through my sweat-caked hair, slicking it back, wanted to look somewhat presentable when the police arrived. All the while they loafed on the couch, sleeping, smiling, laughing, watching, waiting. I couldn't tell. The mask had no holes, and they never spoke. I stood in front of the couch, lightly swaying, an empty swing shivering in a cold wind, observing patches of painted skin sinking between their brittle ribs as they exhaled. How can they breathe, I wondered, given that the plastic edges of the masks seemed to be continuous with their neck. I was no closer to an answer to that question when the police arrived a few minutes later. I implored them to arrest the intruder, begging them to see reason, praying their view matched my own. They looked at the thing on my couch and snickered, eyes gleaming with amusement. I shouldn't have expected them to take the request seriously. How could I? It was just a cat, after all. The police graciously escorted me to the emergency room. Not in cuffs, thankfully. Not that time. All the tests were unremarkable. The clear fluid they drew from my spine didn't show any signs of an infection agitating my nervous system. The urine drug screen came back positive, but only for opioids, and the doctor expected that given I was on naltrexone. The meds helped to dull any residual cravings for my old vices. Alcohol and cocaine shared a chemical similarity to oxycodone. My kidneys, my heart, my liver, every organ seemed to be in working order. As far as the doctor could tell, there wasn't anything wrong with me, and I hadn't ingested anything they believed could inspire psychosis. But then, the psychiatrist asked, I remained insistent, that thing wasn't a cat. From there, my trajectory was set. Next up, Falling Leaves Behavioral Health Hospital. The first time wasn't too bad. My fellow captives were tolerable, and the doctor was nice enough. Smart, too. They eventually had me believing I was suffering under an isolated delusional precipitated by extreme stress. Their words, not mine. Initially, I rejected the theory. The more I considered it, though, the more it seemed to click into place. Undeniably, work had been taxing, and no one else saw Raja as I did. Occam's razor suggested something was wrong with me rather than with everyone else. Not Ike, not Julie, and not the police. Just me. 5 days later, I was discharged. Ike was ecstatic, jumping up and down in the back of our sedan, wrapping a pair of little hands around my shoulders as I clicked the passenger seat belt safely into the holster. Julie was more reticent about my release, but she did a good job faking happiness for Ike's sake. I was the last to enter when we got home. My feet felt thickly calcified on our stone stoop. It took Julie holding my hand to get me inside, practically yanking me over the threshold. The door swung shut behind me. Electricity sizzled up the curve of my neck as I scanned my surroundings. Julie ran her thumb delicately across my palm. The massage was tender and affectionate, but I sensed a similar electrifying hiss along her skin. She was nervous too, and in retrospect, she had every right to be. I saw no masked intruder, my static calmed. I turned to Julie and shot her a flimsy smile. Then there was a noise above us. A quiet, inscrutable message. A painful reminder. Knock, knock, knock. My body became a live wire. Julie's thumb dug vicious stigmata into my palm, having sensed my panic. I glanced up, and there they were, lying prone on the balcony that overlooked our foyer, all but their mask wreathed in deep shadow, knocking the poor, oversized facsimile of Raja's skull against the banister's wooden pillars, alternating left to right, right to left to right. Knock, knock, knock. The lead psychiatrist at Falling Leaves informed me I went absolutely ballistic at the mere sight of our innocent house cat, and that my stay the second time around would be longer, much longer. I don't recall going ballistic, though. I have no memory of what transpired between seeing them again and the point at which I arrived at the psychiatric hospital. All I remember is their terrible, pendulous sway, extended into an infinity. A video of a frozen computer screen, constantly refreshing but never righting itself, never moving on, perpetually misaligned and distorted. A part of me never left that moment. A part of me is still there, watching, helpless. Knock, knock, knock. Julie still visited me over the following 3 months, but only weekly, and she wasn't bringing Ike with her. Not only that, but judging by the way her cheekbones had begun progressively sharpening, she wasn't eating. The stress of it all was getting to her, and that fact killed me. At first, I pleaded, said things like, "I'm not insane, I know what he saw," and, "For the love of God, Julie, you and Ike aren't safe." All she did in response was avert her gaze. My pleas were falling on deaf ears, and the only thing those outbursts were earning me was a longer sentence at Falling Leaves Behavioral Health Hospital. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I realized that feigning recovery from my delusion was the most logical step forward. So, that's what I did. Slowly but surely, I recovered. Even endorsed during a group therapy session that I'd been covertly indulging in some designer PCP-like drugs. Drugs that wouldn't come up on a routine test, but certainly could send a mind through the proverbial garbage disposal. The psychiatrist seemed to buy it. Hook, line, and sinker. 108 grueling days later, my wife brought me home. Her lips twitched as she drove. Her eyes were glassy and bloodshot. She'd lost a significant amount of weight, 20 pounds, maybe more. They were right inside the door when I opened it. preening on their back beside our welcome mat, body contorted into a lazy stretch, silently beseeching a stomach scritch. I watched her anxiety flourish into outright panic, knees fluttering, breath sharp and shallow. Her eyes flashed to me, then to what she saw as a defenseless cat, and back again, petrified about what I might do. Before she could pull her phone from our bag, I was bending down, rubbing my fingers against their belly. Its skin was doughy, but disturbingly coarse, like partially congealed flour with grains of asphalt mixed into the batter. As I suppressed a gag, I felt the silky touch of Julie's hand on my shoulder. "So good to have you back, Marvin," she whispered. I nodded, still rubbing, the dead eyes of their painted mask pointed at me. Julie walked away. As soon as she was out of earshot, I stood up and retracted my hand, which was now coated in a fine, gray, odorless dust. Something was different about them. Their abdomen seemed fuller than before. The solution to this mess, as I imagined it, appeared relatively straightforward. I didn't need to understand them. I didn't need to know what they were, why only I could appreciate their true form, and what their purpose in my home was. I just needed to kill them. Thus, I needed my family incapacitated, unable to intervene. So I dosed them, 1 milligram of lorazepam for Ike, 4 milligrams of lorazepam for Julie. For the record, benzodiazepines were never my vice. I mean, who wants to sleep through their high? Never made much sense to me. Still, I had to use them outside of hedonism as a sort of biochemical kill switch. Having the shakes from alcohol withdrawal? Take a lorazepam. Coca you up a little too revved up? Take a lorazepam. Thankfully, I was able to locate a dusty pill bottle stashed under the floorboard in the attic, a relic of my days as a fiend. It wasn't as dramatic as something like chloroform. They probably just became incredibly drowsy after downing some spiked lemonade, neither very interested in having leftovers prior to turning in for the evening. I helped them up to the stairs, and that was that. Both were out like a light in no time. Ike told me he loved me. Julie reminded me to feed Raja 3 times. She might have her suspicions in the morning, and I figured she'd be distraught to find Raja missing, but I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. As I drew Ike's bedroom door closed, there they were, lying on their belly in the hallway, absent-mindedly flickering water around their bowl with seemingly nailless human fingers. The moment was the first pleasurable one I'd experienced since the whole damn ordeal began. They were making it easy for me. I tiptoed across the carpet, gaze ripe with beautiful violence, and when I was close enough, I knelt down and straddled the intruder. They writhed, attempting to get out from under me. It was no use. Only then did I experience a brief, smoldering curiosity about what was hidden beneath. I clasped my hands to the point where the mask and neck became indistinguishable and began wrenching it upwards. A deluge of endorphins set my blood on fire. My entire body radiated blissful warmth. This fever dream was finally going to be over. When the mask started to give, as threads of anchoring sinew started to snap, that's when I heard their howls, both Julie and Ike wailing in discordant unity. Paternal instinct got me upright. Before my conscious mind could even register the circumstance, I was kneeling beside my son. He was sitting straight up, shoulders tensed to hell and back, eyes rolled into his skull, and God, they were as blood. Tiny crimson dewdrops formed a ring around his neck, exactly where I had been tearing at the mask. His screams grew fainter. After a few seconds, he fell back limply onto his pillow, almost as if he'd passed out within a dream. Only then did the wails completely die out. Then, the house was utterly silent. Julie had stopped too. Whatever I did to them, it seemed to translate to my family. They were connected, tethered. I turned around, nearly toppling back onto Ike from the shock of what I saw. They were there, in the doorway, standing on 2 feet. Raja's hands stretched, vacant face stared daggers into me. Gradually, I got back onto all fours, pawed past me, climbed onto Ike's bed, and curled up at his feet. And I just stood there, paralyzed. The message was obvious. They didn't need to voice it for me to understand. Checkmate. The next morning, as I stewed over a mug of lukewarm coffee at the kitchen table, Julie approached me holding her pillowcase. "Hey, glad to see you up so early." I nodded, keeping my eyes fixed on the black liquid. "What do you make of these stains? Smells a hell of a lot like blood, and it wasn't there when I went to bed. I thought I saw some dried blood on my neck, but I looked myself up and down in the mirror, and it doesn't seem like I have a scratch on me. I don't know, it's just weird." She dropped the pillowcase onto the table and returned to her morning routine. A blotchy, maroon-colored oval marred the light blue fabric, no bigger than a quarter. Flecks of congealed dislodged as I scraped my thumbnail over the stain, but as I put it to my nose and sniffed, I didn't detect even a hint of the sickly sweet iron-kissed scent. Yep, smells like blood to me. Strange, I replied, dropping the pillowcase over the top of a nearby chair. Right? She paced out into the foyer and began calling for Ike. After years of snorting cocaine, my sense of smell was effectively non-existent. Rarely, I'd get a faint whiff of something, but it'd have to be exceptionally fragrant to wake my fried nerves, and it was always fleeting. Julie didn't know that, though. I was used to lying about it, too embarrassed to reveal the lengths to which I'd ravaged my body at the altar of feeling good. My eyes darted to the pantry. There was a muffled tapping coming from the inside. The clack of my wife's heels echoed as she moved to open the door. The intruder spilled out, mass thudding against the floor, cans of beans and boxes of spaghetti toppling over like bowling pins. Raja, you goof, there you are, Julie crowed. They got on all fours and began shaking violently, airing out their hypothetical fur, causing a cloud of pale dust to collect around them. Once settled, they tilted their mask up to look at my wife. She stared back at them, silent, grinning. After a moment, she turned and said to me, Wow, he is vocal today, good lord. At no point did I hear anything from them. Julie paced out of the kitchen, chuckling to herself. I glared at the intruder. They had everyone else fooled, and I couldn't seem to pinpoint what made them so damn special. Suddenly, I had an idea. What if something in my blood was allowing me to see through the illusion? Could I be genetically immune? I pulled my phone from my pocket, walked up to them, and snapped a quick picture. Then I texted my brother. Free for dinner tonight? Ike would love to see his uncle. Dan and I weren't estranged, but we weren't on great terms either. He lived about an hour away and had his own shit to deal with. More than that, though, I'd said some things better left unsaid, while still in the throes of substance abuse. He'd kept me at arm's length ever since. I towered over the indecipherable devil, the haunting melody of my spellbound wife and son laughing upstairs, thumping against my eardrums. My hand buzzed. Sure, good to hear from you. Car's out of commission. Mind picking me up? Happy to, I replied. Then, with no context, I forwarded him the picture I'd just taken and waited. The dots of a pending reply appeared across my phone screen. My heart racketed around my ribcage. My life teetered on what he saw. Ew, what the fuck is that, Marv? Relief washed over me. Tell you more later, be there at 5. I peered down at them and smiled wide, baring my teeth. Most of the trip home from Dan's was silent. I was too nervous to hold a conversation, maniacally tapping on the steering wheel, thoughts spinning. As we were pulling into the interstate, he broke that silence, but not in what I was expecting. Hey, you haven't taken anything, right? Still in the wagon, so to speak, he asked. Automatically, I responded, What? No. God, I wish. Each small word came out swift and punctuated. Even with my peripheral vision, I could tell he was giving me that look. A pitying condescension that felt like a splash of acid gnawing on my skin. The type of look that used to reliably throw me into a rage at a moment's notice. I swallowed and rolled my shoulders, focused my attention on the heat from the setting sun cascading through the windshield rather than the resentment sizzling in my nerves. Things at home have been better, I sighed. Talk about an understatement, but what else could I say? Where would I even start? I lost my job. I was in a psychiatric hospital for months. There's a demon eunuch dressed as my house cat and only I can tell. No, he'd think I'd gone off the deep end. Once he saw it for himself, then he'd be able to spill my guts. Once he understood, then we could start at shies. I'm sure it's not as bad as you... He paused, sniffing the air. A bout of harsh, vigorous coughing took hold of him. His eyes became glassy and red. I considered pulling over by our town's welcome sign, but he waved for me to keep going as I flicked my turn signal on. Sorry, he sputtered. Allergies really have been a bitch this year. The fit abruptly dissipated. When I looked over, he didn't seem concerned, and his breathing was steady, so I just kept going. A minute later, we pulled into my driveway. Hours passed before dinner was ready. We chatted, gave Dan copious updates about Ike, and even had time to play a few games of backgammon while the roast cooked. He continued to cough, but the fits were smaller, more contained. Honestly, he didn't even seem to notice them. All the while, Raja never showed their face. Dread crawled over my skin like termites through wood, but I kept my cool. They'd come. Around 8, the four of us sat down to eat. Lines of steam rose above the glistening pile of meat at the center of the table. Ike, wanting to come off as a proper gentleman, insisted on serving us, dropping asymmetric portions of beef, mashed potatoes, and baked asparagus across each of our plates. "All right, dig in," Julie announced. My son descended ravenously. Still on edge, I gingerly mixed the gravy into the potatoes, eyes darting between each of the 3 entrances to our kitchen. That's when I noticed something peculiar about Julie. She was holding her utensils upright, fork in one hand and knife in the other, but she wasn't moving, eyes locked on me but glazed over. "Honey, everything okay?" The only part of her that budged were her lips. Why wouldn't I be? Something twisted into agonizing knots. I turned to Dan. He was swiping at the meal, but every time his fork missed. A little too high, a little too far to the left. Over and over and over again. "Julie, this turkey is something else," he muttered. Something was desperately wrong. Abruptly, my wife released her grip, utensils clattering against the plate. "Wow, I am stuffed," she proclaimed. Julie sprang from her chair. "Might as well give Raja the leftovers." She balled her hands into a fist, brought it close to her face, and began knocking on her forehead. The resulting sound had an unnaturally pervasive resonance, like hot water running through a loose copper pipe, metal expanding and colliding against a nearby wall. Knock, knock, knock. A series of wild thuds emanated from the foyer, a bevy of hands and feet and knees crashing down the stairs. The frenzied stampede of a starving animal. As the masked intruder charged into the room, Julie walked over to his dinner bowl and dumped the entire meal into it, pieces haphazardly ricocheting onto the side of a cabinet and the surrounding floor. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't seen her eat anything substantial since I left for the trip months prior. A few slices of toast with her morning coffee, but nothing more. Dan pivoted to face them as they entered. I held my breath. He swung to me. His eyes were rolled back into a skull, white balls of tapioca adorned with a lattice work of bright capillaries. Tiny red worms wading through a thick ooze. I was wondering when the little guy would show up. I've missed them. My heart buckled. My mind fractured. Identically, my brother sprung to his feet, grabbed his plate, and dumped it in front of them. Might as well give Raja the leftovers. Pets have to be fed, and we don't want Ike to be the one to feed them, right? No, of course not. We want the best for our prodigy. We want them to grow. We want them to thrive, right? Right. The intruder hastily gathered the tribute into their arms, gravy smearing an impromptu Rorschach test along their trunk, and began galloping past the table. At some point, Ike had gotten up and was standing by the screen door, cracking it open so they could careen into the backyard without losing an ounce of momentum. For months, this must have been their routine. Looking at it, I found myself at a crossroads. I could just give up. Allow my family to be eaten away from the inside out until there was nothing left, until they'd been made hollow. Hell, it wouldn't be hard, and who knows? Weak and empty, they might not even have the brain power to notice if I indulged in a vice or two on the side. A family that would stick around no matter what I did to myself. I wanted that at some point, right? Or I could give chase to that incomprehensible thing, that fucking parasite. Even if it felt hopeless, completely and utterly insurmountable, I could still try. Blood thrumming, heart burning, I shot up and followed them into the moonless night. It's currently 11 p.m. When I finally arrived home, Ike and Julie were sleeping soundly and Dan was gone. But I don't know where he got to since I drove him. There are holes in the forest, burrows, tunnels. I watched the intruder dive into one, still holding the food. When I put my ear to the hole, I heard something. Mewing. Multiple identical high-pitched yowls overlaid with each other. Sounded exactly like Raja when we forgot to fill his bowl. Hungry begging, but an eerie triplicate. I never considered what happened to the real him until that moment. If that is truly our original house cat deep in the hole, that's not all, though. On the way back, I passed by Mr. Hopper. He lives 2 doors down from us. He was walking what he believed to be his husky. The man looked like he'd dropped 30 pounds since I last saw him. It's not just happening to my family. I think the whole town is infested. Not sure what to do next. Search for Dan? Return to the hole? It's unclear, but I'll figure it out. I'm publishing this in case something happens to me. Julie, if you're reading this, I'm not crazy. I love you. And I tried.